Well, guys, why don't we jump into it? I have 31 slides here to go through, and some of them will go through pretty quickly. So I'm going to do my best to MC this webinar, and hopefully we can provide some great content. For those people that were unable to make it, we are recording this webinar, so we could reshare it if need be, and because I have a feeling we're going to be providing some good information. But at the end of the day, we don't want to lecture to any attendees on this webinar. We want to be kind of a sounding board for discussion, because we're all experiencing some very crazy things. And frankly, it's a little bit scary out there, and we're all trying to figure it out as we go. And there's not really a playbook. So we're going to do the best we can. And we, a couple of us, myself, Jessica, Gary, and Aaron, wanted to get together to see if we could provide some help to any small business owners, business managers within their organization, et cetera, to really kind of figure out what we do today, what we do tomorrow, and how we get through this. The purpose of this webinar is really just to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to help small business owners. It's obvious that small businesses are all facing some unprecedented disruption, both financially and personally, this as a result of the coronavirus. So there are countless problems that we need to overcome at this time, and we feel that coming together is the best solution. We're a small community in Lexington, Kentucky. I know we do have some people that are joining in from outside of Lexington and other areas and throughout the country too, a couple of you. So we hope that the discussions on this webinar will help provide some answers for you. This information is meant for any and all small business owners or managers that are looking for some professional opinions, guidance, and support, and especially motivation during this pandemic. So it doesn't matter if you're a service provider, an office professional, a medical professional, legal professional, restaurant owner, retail business, service provider, home and fitness service. It doesn't matter. We're all in this together. We're all experiencing pain in different forms and fashions. So this information is for everyone who's trying to survive as a business owner right now. The panel of speakers and topics today are Gary Barksdale. Gary Barksdale, you can learn more about Gary at besthrassistance.com. He's going to be speaking first and talking about human resources in particular. Jennifer Pfister is going to be speaking about employee payroll. She is with heartlandpaymentsystems.com. Aaron Reedy, our legal expertise here, is going to be discussing certain things as far as legal considerations to keep in mind with contracts, agreements, disagreements during the situation. And offer some really good legal expertise there. And then myself, I run btwebgroup.com, which is a digital marketing agency. And hopefully we can provide some tips and advice to you on how to survive as a business owner with some perhaps marketing strategies, new marketing strategies during this time. Okay, let's see, I'm jumping around, apologize. I need more screens. The agenda for this webinar is each speaker is going to talk about his or her topic of expertise. We will then go through, and after all of our presenters have spoke, we will answer some pre-submitted questions by those of you who are attending today, and hopefully you're able to stick around to the end. And then we're going to open up the webinar for some live Q&A. There is going to be a lot of information discussed. I would strongly recommend that if you have a notepad to take some notes to refer back to, because I have a feeling after looking at these slides and putting these slides together, there are some gems of information in here, and it should be very helpful. Okay, so Gary, you're up first, my friend. Gary, would you give us a quick backstory about who you are, what you do, and then I'll go into your slides. So when you're ready for me to go to the next slide, just let me know, say next slide, please, and I'll filter through accordingly from there. So Gary, the floor is yours. You need no introduction, but why don't you give us an introduction?
Thanks, Brian. I'm the owner of HR Assistance. We're a HR consulting firm, primarily working to support small businesses in all sorts of ways, everything from outsourcing HR to very specific project kind of work. Been in business for about a year and are really just wanting to help other small businesses through this time. When I think about all the things that are challenging us right now as small businesses. And I know we have our hands full with so many things, from finances to whatever else we need to do to sustain our business. Uh, I became a little concerned that we may not be fully informed as to some requirements that have been placed on us as small businesses from the Department of Labor or OSHA or the CDC. And I wanted to spend just a few minutes going over those, just going over those guidelines, and hoping to, if there's a question, we can answer it later, but at least just to make sure that there are all those guidelines out there. And so there's requirements for a safe workplace, and these are pretty self-evident, I guess, but we're required to have an infectious disease preparedness and response plan that's in writing. We also need to develop policies and procedures for dealing with sick employees, how we're going to deal with that. We need to address the provision of personal protective equipment, and we just need to be aware of OSHA guidelines in general, because they all still apply during this period of the pandemic. Next slide. When you think about just handling the daily health of your employees, there are several questions that I'm sure come to mind. Based on the CDC guidelines and others, can you take an employee temperature? Well, generally, no, you could not do that because it would be considered a medical exam and not allowed by the ADA. But in this circumstance, as it relates to the COVID-19 virus, you may take a temperature of an employee coming into your facility. Sending sick employees home, you absolutely must, under all the guidelines, must send sick employees home. Can you require fitness for duty certifications for people to return to their work? You can ask for documentation about their sickness, but the reality is that the healthcare providers really may not have time to provide those documents. So, we're just asked or suggested just to be reasonable in what we do ask for to substantiate somebody being sick and being away from work. You are able to ask, again, when employees report to work, you're able to ask questions related to the COVID-19. You're able to ask about specific symptoms related to COVID-19. So you are allowed to ask some questions, but they're very much have to be related to this issue. And all information you receive through these questions or screenings must be kept separate in a confidential health record. Next slide.
Yeah, Gary, this is great. I just want to interject for real quick. If anyone has specific questions throughout each of these presenters, you are more than welcome to enter those questions in the chat group if you'd like, if they come to you, or you can save them to the end if you like as well.
I have a little more detail on this slide than I do on the others, because these required paid time off are new, and they're a part of the CARES Act that was passed recently by Congress, and the Department of Labor rules were published on April the 1st regarding these requirements, and they became effective on April 1st. So, I'm concerned that many of us might not be aware that we have these new obligations. And so generally, if you have less than 500 employees and even less than 50 employees, basically if you have any employees, you're covered by these requirements. And there's two kinds of leaves here. There's the paid emergency sick leave, which requires that we pay 2 weeks pay for somebody with symptoms or seeking medical advice of the virus. And that's paid at the full rate. There's also a requirement to provide 2 weeks of paid leave at 2/3 pay if an employee is unable to work due to needing to care for individuals who are subject to a quarantine, or if they have child care concerns or issues related to the closure of the school or their child care provider. So there's two different leaves here. There's the sick leave issue, and then there's um, the family and medical leave issue that is an expanded family medical leave. So if an employee is out for the initial 2 weeks for taking care of a child due to the closure of a school, you now have an obligation to expand paid family medical leave for an additional 10 weeks. So for a total of 12 weeks, that employee would be required to be paid 2/3 of their pay under that circumstance. The way companies are able to fund this is through tax credits, and I think Jessica will give us some more information about how that works and how her company is dealing with that. Next slide. I'm just throwing out some other considerations that probably need your attention. If you're allowing people to work from home or requiring them to work from home, you probably need to consider having some written policies about that. You just need to be aware of the wage and hour guidelines when you're reducing hours or pay, particularly for exempt salaried employees, and even for non-exempt. But if you're going to reduce hours or pay, just be aware there's some wage and hour requirements that you have to meet. The same is true if you decide you want to reclassify an employee from exempt to non-exempt. Again, just be aware there's some requirements that you have to meet to do that. You also have to consider how you want to deal with people not working during this time. And there are ways to furlough somebody on a temporary basis where there's an intention, to return them to work, and there's layoffs that could be temporary or could be a permanent layoff. So, you need to kind of understand those two ways of doing it and understand the requirements of either. It's really important that we have employee communication plans and not forget the importance of engaging our employees through this period of time. And I think Brian can probably provide some suggestions on that. And you can't lose sight of the employees' mental health issues that are being generated through this pandemic. And, all of us would have different ways of dealing with this, but we just need to be aware that our employees are suffering as we are, and there are mental health issues that we should be aware of.
Gary, thanks for that information. Appreciate it very much. And that's a great segue into Jessica. For those of you that maybe caught that, I actually called Jessica Jennifer, and she sent me a chat message, and she said, "Ryan, you called me the wrong name. What's wrong with you?" She's yelling at me through chat. No, I mean, actually, I really apologize. I don't know why I said that. I just completely just zoned out. But Jessica,
for some reason, everyone calls me Jennifer. It's kind of my nickname at this point. So
well,
no,
I apologize. My head must have been somewhere else at the time. But Jessica, please, perfect segue into what you're going to talk about. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So I'm a product advisor for Heartland, and we help small businesses with their payroll processes and help them get set up in a very unique plan that's kind of catered toward their specific business. So I'm going to kind of extend on what Gary was talking about. So if you want to go ahead and just jump right in. So as far as reducing hours to pay for non-exempt employees, non-exempt employees do only need to be paid for the hours worked. So during this time, you'll want to still report the time that your employees are reporting, or as far as their working at home goes. You'll still want to make sure that you have a good process in place for that, whether it's paper timesheets. You can go old school, or if you want to get like a web-based time tracking system, you'll want to make sure that you're still monitoring those, but also being conscious of, as Gary mentioned, employees are going through a little bit of a difficult time with this as well. So, finding something that works for everyone is really, at the end of the day, the best thing. And then a reduction in hourly wage may require a certain amount notice under state law. And it's important to note that it can't be retroactive if you're in the middle of a pay period. So that's something that will need to take place. If it's something that you've decided, it will need to wait until a new pay period. Next slide. And then reducing hours or pay for exempt employees. You can implement a pay cut either for everyone or for certain departments or job types. Make sure that you're just being cautious when you're going through these, that you're covering all the bases and not doing a reduction that could unintentionally be classified as discriminatory. We're all kind of in weird situations right now, and learning as we go. So consult with an attorney, or consult with someone who has more information on this if you're even remotely concerned that that something might not be done correctly. And then employees must remain above the federal minimum salary for exempt employees, which is $684 a week, or the higher state minimum. So some things to keep in mind. You can reduce the hours, but make sure it's not done for a temporary basis necessarily, because that could cause some issues. So just go through your specific case, and again, consult with the professionals as you need to, because things are changing daily. So it's good to stay on track with those things. And the next slide. So reclassifying exempt employees as non-exempt. This is a legal act. You can do this unless it's done to avoid the salary basis requirement under the FLSA. So again, don't do this on a short-term basis. It's better if this is something that you think is an act that needs to take place for several quarters or the remainder of the year. That's fine, but just make sure that it's not something that you're going to want to jump back and switch into in a couple weeks. And again, that retroactive rule also applies in this situation. So next slide, I think. So if you can't make payroll, I know that's kind of an issue that's coming up pretty regularly right now. Talk through this with an attorney, talk through this with your banker, see the best course of action there. As many of you have probably heard of the PPP loans and some of the different relief options that the SBA is currently offering. There are ways to get relief here. So as far as that goes, check with your lender, check with, we're processing PPP loans too. I think we're probably going to get more confirmation by the end of today. I've heard that tomorrow things are going to start going again. But be sure that if you are approved for specifically the PPP loan, you're going to want to make sure that you are very accurately tracking that spending. 75% of that, what you borrow, needs to be payroll related, payroll costs. So you're going to want to make sure that you use a very solid tracking system for that, to be able to show all of that once loans are starting to be forgiven. And of course, you can find more information on all the different SBA loans at sba.gov/disaster.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that. It was great information. I have some thoughts, so many thoughts going through my head. I'm going to bring hopefully some of those up during the Q&A question session, so we'll come back to that, but thank you. So next is Aaron Reedy. Aaron is an attorney with Hurt, Deckard & May. You can learn more about him at hdmfirm.com. And Aaron's going to be talking about legal matters to consider as business owners. So Aaron, if you want to give yourself a brief introduction, and then I'll jump to your first slide whenever you're ready.
Sure. My name's Aaron Reedy. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Hurt, Deckard & May. I have been here since I graduated law school back in 2004, and I've been a partner at the firm since 2009. We offer legal services to a broad range of clients, individuals, businesses. Personally, I spend a lot of my time on business planning issues, business litigation, collections, contract law, that sort of thing. Today, I wanted to touch on some of the legal issues that business owners should consider as they're navigating the pandemic and associated closure orders. Some of those things I think Gary and Jessica touched on that are also have some legal components to them. But firstly, I want to talk about contractual issues. For many of you, contracts with vendors, customers, landlords, tenants, etc., underpin much of what you do, even if you don't consult those agreements on a regular basis. And the pandemic has led to and will continue to lead to non-payment issues, non-performance of contracts, as closures and supply chain issues and other problems disrupt life. In dealing with non-performance and non-payment issues from clients, there are both practical considerations and legal considerations. I've had folks come to me and say, my client wants to cancel their agreement. They say they can't pay. What do I do? In those instances, if you've got a client that's expressing those sorts of difficulties, my advice is be flexible and creative. Try to find a way to make it work and manage the relationship. Don't be short-sighted. Depending on the circumstances, if you're taking a hard line with customers who are facing a decision about who to pay and who not to pay, and you're being very adamant about full immediate payment, the customer may or may not pay, and they may not renew or in return. So, they may choose not to pay you and instead pay some other creditor or vendor who was willing to work with them. And then not only have you lost that customer in the long term, but when you're also faced with a collection problem now. How are you going to collect? Is it going to require litigation? Are you going to have to hire an attorney? What does that look like? So in those situations, full-blown litigation is rarely good for anyone but the lawyers. So again, I think it's important to be flexible with your customers. Conversely, if you take a more pragmatic approach and work with a struggling customer, they're far more likely to appreciate it. You'll have endeared yourself to them, and they'll continue to do business long after this pandemic has settled. On the other side of the coin, if your income stream has been choked by the current realities and you find it difficult to pay your own bills, don't bury your head in the sand. Inability to pay is not a valid contractual defense. However, most creditors will take that into consideration and try to work with you. Talk to your vendors, talk to your lenders. Most business people our business owners are good people who have been through tough times before. They know what it's like. So be proactive, don't ignore the problem, and most will help you through it. But if you just choose to flat out ignore your obligations and don't communicate, those are the kinds of folks who end up as defendants in lawsuit and end up dealing with people who aren't willing to work with them. Notwithstanding those practical considerations, it's also now a very good time for all businesses to review their contracts. It's an important time to understand the obligations, both your obligations and your customer or client's obligations, and know where you've got a risk. For example, Can your client terminate their service agreement? Well, it depends. Oftentimes, contracts specify certain circumstances under which it may or may not be terminated, and the mechanism for doing that. So understand your agreements. Know when you might be struck with that situation, and anticipate it in advance. And if you've got any doubt, consult an attorney in advance before you take any action that might prejudice your rights going forward. An ounce of prevention is always worth usually worth at least a pound of cure, if not more. While you're looking over your key documents, consider whether now is a good time to freshen them up. A lot of us, come up with form contracts we do ourselves, and we don't know whether or not they're really going to protect us until we run into a problem or until we've had them reviewed by an attorney. If you think your agreement, if you got a homemade contract, or you think you might need something a little more sophisticated or updated, given the changes in your business, but are gun shy about spending money on an attorney, I encourage you to have that conversation with your legal professional. I can't speak for everyone out there, but I know our office has been willing to provide services under some flexible payment arrangements. In addition to termination provisions that may allow your clients to walk away from a deal, some contracts include force majeure clauses. Those are clauses that excuse some sort of contractual failure to perform if the non-performance is caused by an unforeseen act of God. Whether or not, if you don't have those kinds of provisions in your contract, it's not going to apply, but there may be some other defenses. If they do, it really comes down to just what the language says. The more specific they are, the less if they don't include pandemics, the less likely they're going to come in, they're going to be applicable. The more general they are, I think the more likely it is. And if that's a situation you're facing, don't just assume, heck, everyone knows that I can't perform. Notice could be fatal to that defense. So make sure you read it, understand it, and follow the steps that you need to follow. If you're dealing with performance problems, there's some other doctrines, but what should you do if you're facing any of these problems? First thing, again, review your existing contracts. What do they say about termination? Is there a force majeure clause? What are everyone's performance duties? What can you do to reasonably perform, if possible, to mitigate your damages? And now is the time to engage in discussions with your customers, clients, vendors to mitigate any damages that might be caused by non-performance or non-payment, and try to renegotiate those issues before it's too late. And that's something that certain attorneys can certainly help you with. Let's see here.
Aaron, am I on the right slide for you?
You can skip ahead another slide.
Okay.
Some other things, if you are a business owner or key person, now's a good time to put together a step-by-step plan for if you're unavailable. If you have one or more business partners, do you have an operating agreement? Do you have a shareholder agreement? Those are documents that are akin to like a prenup for a business. They typically outline how a company will be managed, what voting percentages the partners have, what happens in the event of death or disability or other important internal governance issues. If you've got those agreements, now is a good time to consult them and see what they say, and also might be a good time to update those things or get them together before it's too late. I had some other things I was going to talk about, but I think that Gary and Jessica kind of talked about them. Have a plan for symptomatic people. Now is a good time to update your employee manuals. Specifically, if you've got folks working remotely, you need a written remote work policy. that does things like track the hours for non-exempt. You want to make sure you're tracking hours for non-exempt employees. They're checking in, checking out, so that you're not running afoul of, you're paying overtime if appropriate, not running afoul of wage and hour laws. Beware of discrimination risk in those policies. Also, cybersecurity is something you're going to want to take into consideration. Most of our internet security at home is not as secure as what it is in the office. So you might want to have your IT professional assess that situation and make sure you're taking appropriate steps to protect confidential client information, your own financial information, trade secrets, and other sensitive data in the remote work environment, so that you're avoiding liability for yourself and going forward. Couple of little things. Some folks have business interruption insurance. You might want to check your policy. It's insurance that reimburses you for losses for a covered event. My guess is most policies aren't going to provide protection for a pandemic. Usually they apply when there's some sort of physical damage to the company, like fire, flood, or hurricane, but it's certainly something you want to look at if you're experiencing losses, just to confirm whether a pandemic or government shutdown is an event that would trigger that business interruption insurance. Also, for employers, workers' comp coverage is something that could come into play as well. If you have employees who are removed from work by a physician due to occupational exposure to COVID, they may be entitled to temporary total disability benefits. If that's something that you're confronted with, contact your insurance carrier and/or your attorney, and see what you need to do and make sure you're complying with workers' comp laws. And then lastly, Jessica touched on this a little bit, but now that most of us, I assume, are familiar with and have applied for the Payment Protection Program loans, for those of you who applied and are lucky enough to have received some funds from that first tranche, now the issue is, what do you do with the money to ensure that you're going to receive the maximum amount of loan forgiveness? Those funds can be used for very specific things. Make sure you're following those guidelines so that you can take full advantage of the forgiveness. Have a procedure set in place to audit, to track how you're spending it. Make sure you're paying attention to the the deadlines for when you've got to spend that money by, and when you've got to respond to the bank and provide that information. And then if you can, hire back your employees to ensure that the maximum amount's forgivable and restore pay cuts.
Good. Aaron, thanks. That was really good advice. We have a couple questions that have come in, and we will address those here in just a few minutes. So I'll jump into my section, and then we can open it up to Q&A. My name is Brian Evans, and I'm the owner of BT Web Group. BT Web Group is a digital marketing agency and business technology company here in Lexington, Kentucky. We do everything from websites to online marketing to hosting to digital security to phone systems digitally to video, product photography, branding. I mean, anything that's relative to helping a business get more exposure and get more clients and customers, that's what we do. So the topic that I want to speak to everyone about is it's the fact that marketing still matters. We are in a very challenging time. We're all business owners trying to figure out how to continue to pay our bills. So here's how I would recommend you put some of your thoughts in focus when it comes to marketing. The first thing that you need to do, in my opinion, is to communicate. You need to communicate with your asset, your number one asset, which is your database, your list of clients, customers, past customers, leads, etc. A lot of people think, and business owners think, that, well, their number one asset is their equipment and their real estate and their vendors and their employees, and those are all assets. But in my opinion, as a marketer, your number one asset is your database. It's your Excel spreadsheet of all of your customers. their name, email, phone, address, etc. Because at the end of the day, when something as terrible as this happens, and I hate to say it, but I've used an analogy many times with businesses in initial meetings, if their business were to burn down and they lost everything, then their number one asset in the way that they could rebuild as quickly as possible is by communicating with their database, communicating with their clients and past customers and leads, communicating with them through email blasts, direct mail letters, text blasts, voice blasts, basically just creating a relationship and an engagement with your database. So if you don't have a database, now is the time to start thinking and start creating that database. We had a client reach out to us, and they had proposals for all of their clients going back 4 or 5 years in 8,000 individual spreadsheets. Fortunately, we had the technology to be able to scrape those spreadsheets and consolidate them into one master spreadsheet, so that way they could at least get the most valuable information they could, such as name, email address, phone numbers, etc., to be able to go back and communicate with their clients and customers on a bulk scale. So I guess if you once you have a spreadsheet, what you need to do is figure out what software, tool, or resource you're going to use to communicate with them in. There are hundreds of different CRM systems, customer relationship management systems out there. We have one proprietary of our own, but basically you need to put your database into a CRM system of some kind that has marketing automation capabilities to allow you to communicate in a mass form with your list. So that's internal marketing. And basically, in my opinion, the more contact information you have for each person, the better. If your CRM system allows you to segment your database into individual customer types, etc., all the better. So basically, your number one asset, your database, you need to do internal marketing to communicate with your list continuously right now. The next I want to talk about is external marketing. So I would strongly recommend to be very careful with your marketing, not to knee-jerk react and simply just turn everything off as a result of this pandemic, because although we are all being extremely patient and feeling extremely impatient, at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, this pandemic is going to pass. And I recommend that if you have to almost turn things back on with your marketing, I feel as though you're going to be a little bit behind from your competitors in this approach. You can turn things down with your marketing, but you don't ever want to turn your marketing off. Think of it as a faucet. You can turn it up or down based on your lead flow, but turning it off, I think, is always the worst case scenario, unless, of course, that financial matters are that tight where you have to. I'm not telling you what to do with your money, but I would say, rather than turning it off, think about ways to reallocate or be smarter with your messaging. Next bullet point is, now is the time to really make sure that your online presence for your business is 100% accurate, and to make sure also that it's optimized to the best of your ability. If some of these words in marketing really just is completely unsure on what to do, if you're unsure on what to do, then let us know. That's what my company does. That's what we do. But at the end of the day, if somebody, put yourself in the mind of the customer. If you go to Google and search for your business, are you showing up? Is the information that's showing up accurate in your Google listings, in your other online directories, etc., in your social media accounts? Now's the time to make sure that everything you have online is accurate. And although we're all putting out individual fires here and there with our businesses and employees and customers, etc., trying to survive, take some time and really start to refocus on what your business looks like from an online perspective, because frankly, online is the future for all businesses. And if you're not putting your business online, then people are going to be unable to find you. Phone books and all that is a thing of the past. Now a phone book is an online directory. So you need to make sure your directories are all in place. The next thing I would say is to update your messaging. The marketing messages that you used last month in your advertisements, if you were advertising, most likely will not work in this current pandemic economy. You need to make sure that your marketing messaging isn't as perhaps sales oriented, maybe as it used to be or previously. And now it should be probably more genuinely interested in the customer's current situation approach. For example, we're here to help you any way we can tone in your marketing, or we can still do business for you at a distance to maintain your safety. So I would strongly recommend that be smart with your marketing and modify your messaging as far as how you're selling and how you're generating leads based on the current situations. The more relevant you can be to the times with your marketing, the more ingrained you are going to be, and the more you will stand out with your customers when they're looking to do business. And customers are still looking to do business no matter what your business is. So don't give up. Keep focused. Keep pushing hard. Keep putting your message out there. Keep communicating, both internal with your marketing list and then external from the public perspective. The next thing I would say with Marketing Still Matters is now is the perfect time to really start reevaluating your business technology for your marketing inside your business. If you are a restaurant, then you really should be thinking about, if you haven't already, figuring out how to take online orders on your website, or setting up a mobile application, or connecting with your merchant provider to see if they help you or can offer you online ordering through their device. You've got to do more things, more creative, to allow customers to invest and spend money with you and to want to do business with you. And probably the only way to do that effectively and efficiently is through improved technology. I've talked to a lot of businesses that are struggling with their basic phone systems because everybody's working virtually from home. Well, now's the perfect time to really strongly consider cutting the cord with landlines and implementing a digital phone system strategy for your business. So that way, when business owners call into your business, well, it doesn't matter if you're home or at your office desk or in your car or anywhere else, a proper phone system can allow you to, from the customer's perspective, be anywhere you want, and the customer thinks you're in the office. Technology is so scalable and flexible now. Of course, it needs to be set up correctly, and there's a lot of choices, but now's the time to really strongly look at your technology, because technology is the future, and technology is really going to help businesses survive and get out of this pandemic with the least amount of scars possible, in my opinion. I believe this is my last slide. Yes, it is. The last thing I would say is invest more in your marketing. Run better ads with better offers. Now's the time to maybe consider doubling down on your marketing, because we need customers now more than ever. As long as your marketing is trackable and you can see and determine return on investment with your marketing, then this is a fine approach. If you're the old saying that I know half my marketing works, I just don't know which half, if that's you, then that's a big problem. With online marketing and digital marketing, there is no excuse not to be able to track everything, from the penny to the lead and the return on investment thereafter. So I would recommend, if you are able to do so, strongly consider investing more in your marketing, running better ads with better offers, because customers are still searching for your product or service. Pay-per-click advertising is, in my opinion, one of the best ways to get in front of customers very quickly. Of course, you're going to pay to be in front of those customers. If somebody types in Google a search phrase, you have to pay for that, for your ad to come up for that specific search phrase. And how much you are willing to pay is going to determine how frequently your ad will show up online. It's also how your position online on that first page is also going to determine how much you're willing to pay. I will say that from the research we've done and seen, that most cost per click campaigns across the board, from what I've seen, have dropped about 6% from how much it used to cost to what it is now for the same click. Now, that's not a huge margin, but if you think about it, your customers now are sitting around in front of their screens and computers more than ever. You need to be in front of them. So pay-per-click advertising is a great way to do that. And unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges I see that business owners always come to me with is they're afraid to invest money in their marketing. You cannot be afraid to invest money in your marketing, especially if it's set up correctly and you're tracking everything correctly, to be able to determine return on investment with your marketing. But I understand completely that marketing is an expense, but really it should be viewed as an investment. So again, as long as the tracking and the right people are in place to manage this for you effectively, then hopefully every dollar you spend can bring in more than what it costs to acquire that customer. And if your marketing and if your business is as good as you know it is and you believe it is, then that customer who did business with you one time that you maybe broke even on, or to acquire that customer, they should come back to you again and again and again with follow-up marketing, internal marketing strategies, so that way they're going to want to continue to do business with you. And then from there on out, that's pure profit from that customer or client. The other thing I would say is be more creative with your offers right now. Again, being consistent with the times, be more flexible, offer if you can, pay later incentives or pay in installments, or offering exclusive hours or appointment only settings for people that want to do business with you. I know we're still under a quote unquote lockdown, so to speak, and it's difficult to do these things, but you can start figuring out how to prepare an implementation plan for re-engaging your customers when this pandemic is over. So people still want to do business with you, and they will want to do business with you once this is over, but it's up to you, the business owner, to come up with a marketing plan and strategy to give the consumer confidence that they can do business with you. So it's all about engaging your customers and giving them confidence that, yeah, this is over. We may have been a restaurant, but these are the things we've done to ensure your safety, that you can do business with us again, or whatever your business industry is. So with that being said, those are my slides, and we're going to open this up now to Q&A. We do have some questions that have come in, and I think the first thing would be to address a few of those. Aaron, I'm gonna send this one to you and Jessica, but Shannon sent a message saying that she was told by her bank that all the SBA monies have been used up, and I know probably a lot of people have heard that. So can you just give maybe a quick update on what you see out there as far as money that might come back to be available, if at all, and how business owners can maybe expect that?
Yeah, the payment protection program funds have all been exhausted, and I believe all the SBA loan money as well. However, Congress is in the process of adding some additional funds to those pools, and I think, as Jessica mentioned, hopefully that's later this week. So
well, and I think preliminarily I can say that it's been approved. It's just now it's communicating to the banks and the lenders on the process going forward. So I believe that it's been approved. And as far as your individual bank goes, banks in the first round potentially has exhausted their capacity. So your bank very well, Chase could be dried up, for a lack of a better term. That's kind of what I'm running into, what I'm seeing. So my recommendation, if your bank says no, go with a direct lender. I can help. You can always reach out to me, and I can at least, if I can't get you processed myself, then I can work with you and find someone local who can help. But I do think that I think probably by the end of today we'll have a pretty good update on next steps.
Yeah, I'd like to say, just from a personal experience, and I'm not going to name my bank, but it's a bigger bank, and I applied for the program and applied as soon as we were allowed to do so. And it was unfortunate that by the time the application finally went through, everything was gone. So it's almost like the bigger banks were just completely behind the curve by about 2 weeks with the whole process. And it's unfortunate. So I don't have it. That's just a comment more than anything, but hopefully they'll be able to step up and take care of their customers too.
I would encourage everyone that's applied for the payment protection program loans that was originally denied because the funds were exhausted, to go ahead and follow up with your lender and make sure that your application, they know the underwriting guidelines now, so follow up with them, make sure your application's in order, and let them know that you want to reapply as soon as the lenders are able to put those through again.
Okay. We have another question here that came in through a submission, and it says, cost tracking. Can you talk about cost tracking directly caused by COVID-19, employee training, social distancing, best practices to minimize exposure between work teams, i.e. dedicated teams, and not mixing, performing new OSHA required COVID training without being able to do so in group settings? Can PPP used to be, and then another question, can PPP be used to pay owner, state, and local taxes, same as employees? Why don't you do the PPP question first, Aaron, if you don't mind, and then Gary, if you want to touch on the first part.
What was the question?
Can PPP funds be used to pay owner, state, and local taxes, same as employees?
It depends.
Okay.
Payroll, so it can be used to repay payroll costs, and whether or not self-employment income it falls within the scope of those allowable expenses. Just it depends on a lot of different factors.
Yeah.
Maybe Jessica can answer that a little bit better.
Okay. Jessica, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so what I'm aware of is that it will handle employer taxes. And then in regards to the employee payroll, it's everything that's taken out of the payroll taxes. So that or the payroll itself per employee. So that'll cover, health insurance and situations like that. So there's a specific list I was actually trying to pull up to reference. I'll see if I can grab that, but it covers more than just your employees' gross wages.
Yes, it includes healthcare costs, and if you're self-employed and you pay yourself a paycheck, it can include that compensation. But dividends and other type of compensation, you can't give yourself a raise, and you're whatever you pay, it's going to have to be income you pay out to be forgiven is going to have to be income that's taxed.
And I don't know if this is right or wrong, but from a tracking perspective that we talked about briefly, although we have applied and not received any funds, I was advised by my banker to consider setting up a separate bank account specific for the funds to go into and then paying expenses directly out of that to assist. So we have done that, whether or not that matters at all, but it's probably just a side thought.
It's not required, but it's certainly a good practice to segregate those funds and make sure that you're putting those directly to the allowable expenses, specifically the forgivable, the items that you can apply the money to be forgiven.
Sure. And then Gary, we had a question that kind of followed up to what you spoke about minimizing exposure between work teams and best practices during this time. Do you want to hit on that again?
Sure. OSHA's guidelines is that you have to assess the workplace and first determine the level of risk for your employees. And then you're required to take appropriate steps to eliminate or reduce that risk for your employees. And it really depends on the kind of business you have to do that. The thing that's important to know is there's a general duty clause in the OSHA that says we are required to provide a safe work environment for our employees. So there's different things that are being recommended. There are environmental controls that can be put in place, such as ventilation improvements, barriers between workspaces, shields, those kind of things that are considered engineering or environmental. Then there's just some administrative controls, such as policies that allow flexibility and when people work that will allow people to work different schedules to eliminate contact and to allow fewer people in the work site at the same time. So different schedules, different shifts. Certainly the option to work from home, if it's possible, is something that you really kind of are required to consider if it's an option, because it adds to your requirement to provide a safe work environment if working from home is a thing to do. We're required to have certain posters up regarding this particular policy, particular thing, so you need to get those. So those are some of the things that have been put out by the CDC or OSHA regarding this particular virus as it relates to how do you make your workplace safe. Again, depending on the business you have and the kind of workspace it is, but you're required to implement all reasonable things you can do to prevent the illness from spreading.
Thanks, Gary. We have another question that just came in. It says, and Aaron, this is probably a legal question. So if a business has an employee and multiple employees get sick with COVID-19, what risk do they have to be sued by the employee? And what if the employee dies from the illness?
Well, if it's an occupational exposure, it's a workers' comp claim, and it would be processed. That's the exclusive remedy under those circumstances, and that's how they would potentially pursue compensation. You could be looking at the argument. There's some argument probably that could be made that there was a safety violation if you were aware of the problem and didn't take appropriate steps, which would enhance the employee's compensation. There are there are benefits that are paid out to if someone dies as a result of an occupational injury or exposure as well. So all those are that's a workers' comp issue, and certainly you want to minimize that risk for yourself and for your employees if you can.
Okay. If anyone has any other questions, now's the time to type them into the chat bar. It's probably the easiest way to do so. And while we're waiting for any other questions to come in, I do want to say, maybe give some advice from a working from home virtual communication with team members perspective. It's hard for people to work from home especially if they're accustomed to working and coming into the office every day. Obviously, we're all human. There's a tendency to want to sleep in. There's a tendency to there's so many distractions. So what we have done, I think it's working, but what we have done is we have a morning call every single morning with the entire team, a conference call. You could also do a Zoom call, but we're doing a conference call because, frankly, I think probably a lot of people are not, showering and getting dressed, and that's okay. I'm not either. So a quick conference call helps. Let's just communicate and be on the same page to make sure that even if we're talking about the same things that we were doing yesterday, let's still talk. Let's still try to create some form of normalcy in the business. So we do that every single morning, Monday through Friday. The other thing that we do is we chat with our team back and forth a lot throughout the day. There are many chat softwares and things out there, but I would recommend Google Hangouts or Google Chat, or there's other ones. Glip by Ring Central is a great one. We use that too. So just communicate. The best advice I would give is now is the time to over communicate with people, not to micromanage, but to make sure that we all feel as though that we're still working together, even though it's a virtual environment. So I would encourage that. Use Zoom, use other platforms, pick up the phone and call, just communicate. You need to be communicating now more than ever.
Ryan, I would just suggest that another consideration about communicating with your employees is the concept of keeping an engagement with your employee. Employee engagement is such an important consideration that kind of adds on to the communication when you really express your concern for them and you deal with their concerns and you hear them and you have empathy and those kind of things, that you demonstrate your concern and care in any way that you can to keep people engaged and feeling good about the employment they have. So.
Yep, I agree. We have another question here that says, what resources are available for Lexington businesses to connect online outside of those already being offered by Commerce Lexington? I wonder what percentage of local businesses are using those resources to connect during these times and how we can grow those numbers. Jessica, do you want to maybe hit on that, on some of what you're hearing or seeing?
Well, outside of Commerce Lex, there are several associations that are specific to industry types. So honestly, if you just go old school and Google some different groups, I mean, that's where I've been most successful in finding support groups and people who are looking for different resources and advice and just a way to get together. There are panels like Women Leading Kentucky who have switched to virtual platforms. I think all of these networking groups have had to transform and do everything online. So it's definitely been a little bit of a learning curve, and some are adapting more quickly than others, but they're definitely starting to shape up and show up. A lot of times just in my Facebook feed, if I go over to events, I can see events that, my connections are attending, and, just kind of combing through things like that. That's been where I've found the most benefit for joining newer groups. I think everyone wants to connect. I think most people with our like mindsets are wanting to engage, and how can we help each other, and how can we stay in touch? I mean, we are introvert, extrovert, we're all in these industries because we like people. So I think just as us being like-minded, we're all trying to find a way to stay connected and communicate. So
what I like to do, if we don't have any other questions that have come in, so if you guys enjoyed this webinar, I would strongly recommend and encourage you to please give us your feedback. And on the feedback page, you can go to lexhelpbiz.com/feedback. And on that feedback page, you can also request for any of the panel speakers to contact you directly if you want. We're here, we're small business owners in our respective businesses, and we have each individual expertise. And honestly, we just want to help if we can. We feel your pain. We're all dealing with this struggle and challenge, and your feedback would be greatly appreciated. So if you wouldn't mind to do that, we would very much appreciate it. And maybe before we finish up here, if each panel speaker could just end with some final thoughts or final recommendations of any kind, and then we'll close it up. So Gary, would you mind going first? Any other final thoughts you'd like to leave for our attendees today?
I would just circle back to just being aware of the obligations we have as employers that have been imposed upon us by different federal rules or regulations, and seeking assistance if you need it. Again, we're all trying to help, and we all are willing to work with anyone to provide assistance in any way they need, and we're available if you need us.
Yeah. Jessica, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, we're all, not to be redundant, I know our governor says this a lot, but we're all in this together, and we're going to get through this. But don't be afraid to ask for help, to reach out to resources, because I know every day there are things that come up in my time where I have whether it's what to do with my child. I have a 2-year-old running around, and I'm trying to avoid putting a screen in front of him all day long, whether it's how to handle your children, or just get your life organized right now, navigating the work from home, specific accounting information, like all that stuff. Just don't be afraid to reach out, because we're all learning new things every day, and new rules are coming out every day. So we're all navigating this together. So lean on each other.
Thank you. Aaron?
I think Jessica and Gary hit the nail on the head. Be aware of what's going on around you. Be aware of the new regulations and rules. You can find some information out there pretty easily. But if you've got questions, ask your professionals. And just don't bury your head in the sand. Keep communicating with people, and everybody will get through this.
So, I guess my final comment would be, despite the times that we're in, there is still, I believe, so much that we can all individually and collectively be grateful for. And when I get stressed, like everyone else, I really try to think about that. My wife, my children, my family, and friends. That's really what life's all about. Business is just something we do during our life. And hopefully the businesses we are running is providing value to other people, and we're just dealing with an insanely crazy time right now, which will pass. So I would say just try to find ways to be positive and be grateful. And we are all here for you. So if you have any questions or need help, let us know. And if we can't help you, we will. And if we are unable to, I'm sure we will all refer you to who we believe might be the best course of action with your needs. We would strongly appreciate if everyone could please just take a minute and go to lexhelpbiz.com/feedback, give us your feedback. And if you are interested, if you did feel this was helpful, we have considered maybe doing this again in the future, just to continue to keep conversation open and questions answered, and just to be a support for people in Kentucky and surrounding areas. So if that's an interest to you, please let us know as well. But at the end of the day, I appreciate you taking some time out of your day to join us for this business talk. So thank you everyone for attending and joining. Please give us your feedback, and hope everyone has a blessed day. Thank you, everyone. Jessica, Gary, Aaron, thank you guys.
Thank you all.
Have a great day.
You too.
Easy.